This is Paul Leary, and you are listening to the Brutally Delicious Podcast.
I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yes, sir.
Chris, you want to jump in first?
Okay, so I was just, we got this interview yesterday, and I was like, okay, so I was listening to the album just now, and the first song that came out, Do You Like to Eat a Cow? And not only did I find the messaging like bang on, but it's also somewhat of a political statement, but done with humor, which I found, like, I was rolling, like, do I want to eat the penis of a pig? Well, obviously I don't. So you have this kind of political statement wrapped up in humor. How, and this is something that you've kind of always done, I guess, but how did you come about reaching that point? Is it just something that came naturally to you, or is it something that you really worked on and crafted over a long time?
Yeah, well, that particular album was like 10 years in the making. I think it was when I started out, I was hoping it was going to be a Butthole Surfer album, and then that kind of fell apart. And so I just decided to finish it myself. And I tend to come up with ridiculous song ideas when I'm riding a bicycle around town. And that one came to me over a period of like a couple of weeks. I had to record it just to get it out of my head.
Yeah.
I have nothing against people eating the penis of a pig or any of that other stuff. I just think it's cool to be honest about it when you're doing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just laughing because I was just like, this could be like an anthem for the vegetarian population or the vegan population, you know? And
yeah,
then
they're welcome to do it.
Yeah. And then the next one I saw was sugar is a gateway drug.
That one was one of the ones that got me.
I can't tell you. Well, the thing that got me about it is I'm from Canada, and I almost never had sugar because it's just not a big thing in Canada as much. I moved down here, and you can't escape sugar. It's everywhere. It's in everything. It's like they put it in everything.
Milk.
Yeah, it's like I got yogurt down here, and I was like, holy shit. Like, this thing's going to give me cavities, you know? So, like, I was just laughing because it almost seemed like a children's song, but it was so brilliant in its delivery that it was too advanced to be a children's song. And I just found the writing brilliance in this album to be something that I wasn't really expecting, to be honest.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Bruce?
So, yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about the favorites, I kind of really liked Speedo Man caught my attention right off the bat.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's a bonus track on my Reissue album.
So what
Speedo
made
Man
you...
damn near made me piss my pants when they...
I don't, I recorded that about 30 years ago when I recorded the rest of that album that's being re-released. And I don't know. There was this guy in town that was known as Speedo Jim. He was on the punk scene, but he was rumored to hang out at parties in Speedos where, guys were hanging out in Speedos. And I think that was the inspiration for the song. But
Nice.
Hard to remember 30 years later, I guess, right?
What was it like going back and revisiting those songs after so many years, getting ready to reissue it? Were there any second guesses or maybe I shouldn't do this? Or
nothing but second guesses. I mean, it was just, I didn't want to do it for the longest time. I mean, when that album came out, I think a couple of years later, I took boxes of those records to the dump. I was just ready to, the whole album came from a dark period of my life that I don't even like to remember.
Right.
And so going through this album kind of was dredging all that experience up again. And so it wasn't a whole lot of fun. It was, it was a dark time. But Kramer from Shimmy Disc really wanted to re-release it, and over time he kind of wore me down, and now here it comes.
Yeah, only got like 2 weeks from it.
Maybe.
I've lost track. I wasn't sure if it was coming out this week or next week or what. But
yeah, my notes say the 17th.
Yeah,
that sounds good to me.
So I know you don't like to remember, but what was so dark about that time, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, it was. we weren't making a whole lot of money at the time, and being on the road with the Butthole Surfers and just the whole shock value of every night being in total mayhem, and then coming home and feeling out of place, and being in a marriage that wasn't working out so well. I'm in a great marriage right now. So
yeah.
It's just not a whole lot of good memories from 1990 for me, you know.
I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand that about touring musicians, you know, like they go out and they're the center of attention and things are just over the top crazy. You're playing to people that love you and they might think the world of you, but you might not have a dime in your pocket, you know? And then all of this is happening and you have all these conflicting emotions of like, holy shit, we're on top of the world. Holy shit, my bank account's empty. Holy shit, they love me. Holy shit, my life is falling apart at home. Holy shit, you know, like this is amazing. I can't wait to go on the road. Holy shit, I can't pay rent. You know, and then you get home and you're like, how the fuck am I going to pay rent? How the hell am I going to do any of this stuff? You know? But yet you still have that one love, which is music. So how did you kind of rectify that situation?
I became a record producer.
Which is actually really interesting because I didn't know all of I went down the rabbit hole prepping for this thing, and I didn't realize that you had produced U2 and Sublime, and I mean, I was totally in a rabbit hole. How did you end up with like bands like that? And
well, I'd been producing Butthole Surfers albums. I didn't even know I was producing them, or what a producer was, but that's kind of what I was doing. And there was a time back in the late 80s when I was listening to this band called the Bad Livers that were out of Austin. It was a bluegrass band. They would do things like Hendrix covers and stuff. They were a lot of fun. And I'd go see them like every week. And one day I told them that I'd pay for the recording studio if they'd let me produce an album for free. And they did. And I made an album called Delusions of Banger by the Bad Livers. And, you know, it was a cool album and everything. And then a few years later, you know, we made an album with John Paul Jones, and I played the Meat Puppets for John Paul Jones quite a bit. And the Meat Puppets asked me if I would contact John Paul Jones and see if he'd be interested in producing them, which I thought would be a shoo-in because I thought he liked him. And I asked him and he said no. And so I gave the message back to the Meat Puppets, and they were like, well, you know, we like that Bad Livers album. Would you do that? So that album that I did for free led to my first paying gig as a producer, and that had a radio hit and went gold, and then that led to Sublime, and then it's been happily ever after.
That's wonderful.
So this is really cool. You know, you go from like a songwriter, performer to a producer, which is the path a lot of people take. It's the path I took as well. I haven't produced U2 or Sublime, however, but
yeah, I was actually just a recording and mix engineer for U2. The producer was Chris Vrenna, who was drummer for Nine Inch Nails for a while, and they contacted U2 contacted him to do a remix of a song for like some movie. I can't remember which one it was. And so he and his buddy got together and they did a remix. But they played guitars and drums and did a bunch of stuff on their own. And U2 liked it, but they wanted to play the stuff themselves. So they flew us out to Los Angeles to this big fancy studio, and they came in on their 707, you know, during the middle of their tour. And you know, and I'm the engineer, and I've never, you know, been a recording engineer except, you know, for the Butthole Surfers, which really doesn't count. And so I'm like trying to record guitars and drums and stuff. And I'm telling them, hey guys, be patient with me. This is my first gig, you know.
Oh,
you too.
My first gig.
Yeah.
Edge, hook up your Vox AC30. Let's go.
They were real nice about it, and they were a lot of fun. They didn't know who I was until the end when Chris Vrenna said to them as we were getting ready to leave, he goes, hey, did you know that this guy is Paul Leary? And Edge goes, you're the guitar player for the Jack Officers. And I was like pretty blown away by that because not many people know that.
That's funny. That's really funny. Are you planning on taking this on the road at all?
No, I'm done with the road. I had plenty of that.
Yeah.
I've seen every Denny's in America, and then they, you know.
And I imagine touring is rough these days anyway.
It's just not fun, you know. I've got a really cool house and a cool neighborhood with a great wife, and I can do whatever I want. I don't even have to get out of bed if I don't feel like it. It's a great life.
That's beautiful.
That sounds like a great life to me. Like, why would I go to another Motel 6 and eat at Denny's or get the Motel 6 continental breakfast? You know,
the Mexicali omelet.
yeah.
I stopped work. I had a computer blow up in my studio, and so I stopped working for 2 years. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day and I realized, God, I can't take this anymore. I thought I was going to retire and it'd be all great. So I went out and bought a new computer, and now I'm back to work again, and there's a new passion.
Can I ask you a question? Cool. Why wait 2 years to replace a computer?
I thought I was going to retire.
Just you thought
I
that
thought,
was
well, this is a sign. It was one of those deals where the computer blew out, and it took out my boot drive, and it also took out my time machine drive. So I was left with nothing.
Oh my God.
And so eventually, I got a new computer and started over from scratch and rebuilt, all, my Pro Tools and my plugins and my, sound libraries and blah, blah, blah. Now I've got a really great system.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing great systems. Did you just recently build the system or?
Well, I've been, I've had a studio in my house for, 20 years or more. But it just keeps getting better and better. And this last year, I put a bunch of money into it and upgraded equipment and monitors and stuff. And now it's like, wow, I'm getting some really good stuff. My mixing has come a long ways in the last year. So,
isn't that cool? Is like that? That's something I love about mixing and producing. It's like you're never done. There's always more to do. There's always more
to learn for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And mixing is wild. You look at mixing and think, well, that can't be too hard. You turn the treble up, you turn the guitar down, whatever. And man, it's hard.
Oh yeah. It gets intense, especially when things start masking and you're like, okay, now where is this going? And you have the band saying this part needs to be front and center. And you're like, holy fuck, that sits in the exact same space as everything else in this mix. How the fuck am I going to do this?
Well, yeah. The answer to that question and every other question is parallel compression.
Nice.
In the old days, like when we'd be in the studio with an engineer and putting the poor guy through that very same stuff, it'd be like, that needs to be a little brighter. And he'd reach over to the knob and pretend to turn the knob, but he wasn't turning and goes, is that better? So I was like,
yeah, okay. That's it.
Yeah, I saw the greatest little meme the other day, and it was like every studio needs a client fader. So you put a fader and it's all marked out with a star and everything. They're like, okay, this needs to come up like half a dB, and they're like, okay, the fader's right there, just use that. And it's not assigned to anything. It's just the client fader. Make them feel important, It
reminds me of my good friend Stuart Sullivan, who's engineered a lot of stuff for Butthole Surfers. He did Beat Puppet, Sublime. I've worked with him for decades. And he was telling me about recording with Jello Biafra, and they did a project, and they finished up real late at night, 1 a.m. or whatever, and went home. And then at 3 a.m, Jello called Stuart up and says, "You got to get me back into the studio. I need to fix something in the mix." And Stuart was just begrudgingly agreed to do it. And they went back in there, at like 3 a.m, and Stuart was too sleepy to do anything. And Jello sat there at the board and started turning knobs and adjusting faders, and he goes, "That's it. I put the teeth back into the mix." And Stuart didn't have the heart to tell him that the part of the board he was messing with wasn't even plugged into anything.
Nice. That's great.
That's the downside of mixing in the box now, because there's no like hardware faders. You're just looking at a screen and everything is there for you.
Yeah, pretty much. Although I do a hybrid analog. I do some mixing in the box, but I've got like really great pieces of analog tube compressors and tube EQs and that kind of stuff, and so it doesn't come out like it in the box.
Yeah. What I know. I'm getting way into the weeds here, but since I'm an audio engineer, I always go into the weeds if someone wants to.
So, yeah.
What kind of tube compressor are you using?
Well, I've got one of those Anthony DeMario Lab 670 stereo You familiar with that? It's like a clone of a Fairchild 670.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but I know the 660 and the 670 for sure. Absolutely. I've used them.
I know people that like those better than the original. It's really stunning. And then I've got like the Tube Tech multiband compressor. Yeah. And I've got a retro stereo compressor. And I've got an Obsidian, which isn't tube, but it's still really cool. And then I've got something by a company called Heritage Audio.
Oh, yeah.
Then I've got a bunch of old Neve compressors that I have like fine-tuned to be all matched so I can run, drum pairs through and things like that. So,
oh my God, that must have cost you an arm and a leg, those Neve compressors.
Oh yeah. That was like, well, they're not by Neve, they're by
okay.
BAE, but it's Neve components.
Yeah. No, BAE makes great stuff.
They make great stuff. And
I was looking at getting a pair of 1073s, like real 1073s, where they take them out of the desk and
I've got one of those.
And I was just like, $22,000. Okay, I'm not getting that.
Oh, I need to sell mine. I think I paid like $4,000 or $5,000 for mine, and I thought I was getting fleeced.
Oh yeah, no, the real ones that come out of the desk and they rehouse them in the modules. They've gone way up in price. So I was just like, okay.
I hardly ever use mine too. I need to sell that. That's good to know.
Yeah, they gone way up. I was just like, holy shit. So a friend of mine who's an audio engineer who trained me, he always sends me all this audio talk stuff, like check out these Neves or check out the Shadow Hills bus compressor, which I have the software version and I can't live without it. But they only make like 5 or 10 a year. I can't remember. It's like ridiculously low and they're like $40,000 each.
A friend of mine's got one of those.
Oh my God, they sound so good.
You get to choose nickel transformer or iron transformer.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah. There's a company out of Vancouver called Sonic Farm, and they make, in my opinion, the best microphone preamps that I've ever heard in my life. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, you just plug it in, and suddenly you're like, oh my God, that's what I've been missing my whole life. And they make like inline tube, like line mixers, I guess you say. So you can run your mix through them and stuff, and they just go through tubes. And everyone from like Lady Gaga and all these pop mixers use them live too. It's really crazy.
I want to check that mixer out. I'm like using a dangerous summing device.
Yeah, this isn't a summer per se. This is just like a line mixer. Like you plug your stereo mix through it.
Oh, okay.
And it just, for whatever reason, it just goes, hello, I'm here. Your mix has arrived. It's
the beauty of tube gear.
Yeah.
Should we bring this back to Paul Leary?
Yes, we can. Sorry.
No, I don't mind listening. But so, Paul, are you one of those guys that's always writing, and are you planning on releasing new material?
I don't know. I didn't really plan to write. It's just stuff gets in my head, and it tends to stay there unless I record it and work on it and finish it, and then I can like part with it. It's like going to the bathroom or something. And so there'll probably be more of that. I really don't plan what I'm going to do. It just kind of comes along.
I guess it's helpful to have the studio in your house like too.
Yeah, I spent all of my time there.
It kind of seems like you worked your way into lucky situations, like hard work creates luck.
Yeah, I've been very lucky, and I sure appreciate it too.
Yeah. But is that kind of an accurate statement? Like you worked your fucking ass off trying to get stuff done. Oh, pardon my language. And suddenly you found yourself just put in these situations because you work so hard, and those situations may not have been what you envisioned originally, but it's kind of where it took you.
And then I also get like lots of friends that want me to mix songs for them and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, it's hard to tell them, you're talking about like 3 or 4 days of work there, it's especially depending on what you're going to give me, which is usually going to need a whole lot of work.
Right.
Well, yeah, especially nowadays. I mean, you get tracks, people will send this to you, make it sound like this platinum record from 1995 or whatever, or even a current one, and you get it and you're like, oh, that's not possible.
Yeah, play for that. If you wanted that sound, you should have recorded that sound.
Yeah, exactly. They record a cardboard box. Give me that kick drum from the Black album. Okay.
I find myself replacing entire drum kits far too often.
Oh yeah. What are you using for that?
Superior Drums 3 and Addictive Drums 2.
Cool. Yeah, Tracker in Superior 3 is a great little piece of kit.
Tracker?
Yeah, like in Superior Drummer 3.
Oh, yeah, that.
Yeah, where it grabs the transients for you and you can just drag the MIDI in.
That is a good feature, and I need to do that more. I'm so old school that I go in there and just start plugging in MIDI notes, transient by transient.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, hell, man, before all that, I used to be hired to go in and there would be like samples in the regions folder back when they were called regions. And I would tab to the transient and then I would snap the sample in and I would have different velocity samples there. And I would just like constantly have to tab and snap samples in all the way through. Fuck, I don't miss those days at all.
No, you don't. There was a piece of gear called a Russian Dragon, which told you whether you were behind or ahead. And what was it? The Wendell drum replacer.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Oh my God. Sorry, Bruce. I'm going off topic.
No, that's okay. We're just kind of just chatting. I hope you don't mind, Paul. So what's next for you then? I mean, I know you may or may not write some songs. Are you producing more stuff, or what are you up to?
Right now, there's a documentary movie being made about the Butthole Surfers.
Wow.
By a guy named Tom Stern, who we've worked with back in the 80s. We've known him forever, and he's a real good guy, and I feel really good about him making the documentary. And so I went into our Butthole Surfer tape vaults and been pulling out old analog multi-track tapes and mixtapes and baking them in a convection oven and transferring them to Pro Tools. And so I'm like remixing stuff that was mixed horribly back in the day, and it's like, that's a lot of fun. So I'm hoping to have at least one or maybe two albums ready to come out by the time that documentary comes out next spring, hopefully next spring.
Well, that's really cool, because when you look back at like, especially the 80s, engineers didn't know how to handle music like that. So they weren't mixed well generally,
I was the engineer.
Oh, well, sorry.
I didn't know Jack.
Oh, shit.
So this is the exception then. The Butthole Surfers were the exception.
Yeah. When we recorded an album, we bought like an old 1-inch tape track machine that stood 7 feet tall and weighed 10,000 pounds. And we bought like one microphone and you plug it into the back and record one thing at a time. Okay, snare, toms, guitar, bass. And then you fill up 8 tracks and then you mix it through some little terrible board that, should be taken out and shot. and it sounds like ass, and now I'm getting those old tapes out and transferring them to Pro Tools and being able to do it proper. It's been a lot of fun.
Is it eye-opening to go back and look at your work from that far, like that long ago?
It is, because by now I've forgotten how all that stuff was done. I wasn't sure what I was going to find. Took no notes on anything. I've just got all these tapes and I had to bake them and transfer them to find out what's on them.
Yeah.
We were screwed up.
Did you ever imagine?
We were trying to make the worst music possible, and we were pretty successful doing that.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine 30, 40 years later that you'd still be doing this and it'd still be relevant?
No, I was pretty certain I'd be dead. Being in the Butthole Surfers was like suicide.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Then one day I woke up and was like, I don't need to be angry anymore, and maybe living's not so bad. That's the thing about, when I was a rock star back in the day, I used to dread the thought of being a washed up rock star. And that's way better. It's way better to be a washed up rock star. It's a lot more fun.
That's a really interesting take, and not something I'm sure a lot of people feel that, but they never say it in public.
I hope they feel that, because it's been real rewarding, because I can sit around and wait for the mailman to bring me checks. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
that is a great situation to be in. Royalty checks rule.
They do. I get paid for work I did 30 years ago, and I make more on it now than I did 30 years ago. So,
wow.
It's weird. I don't understand how the music business works. I don't want to understand it. None of it makes any sense to me at all. But somewhere money.
Yeah, if the check's in the mailbox, you're good to go.
Yep.
Just don't ask, don't tell, right?
Don't ask. Don't rock the boat.
Yeah. Where's this money coming from? Shut up and put it in the bank.
You got to give it all back.
Sorry, I bought a new computer.
After 2 years.
I built a studio.
That's all
built
I've
a
got.
studio, bought some video. Yeah, I could talk all day about audio engineering, but that's not really interesting to a lot of people. I know it is to me, but I have to ask, though, what monitors are you using now?
I just got new monitors, and they've changed my life. It's the Adams S1.
Oh, great speakers.
They are. I was using a cheaper Adams for a long time and kind of struggling. You know, I had the big $1,800 Adams subwoofer, which also helps a lot. But when I got the S1, it's like, I've never loved near field monitors before, and I love these monitors. I just love them.
Interesting. I
hear everything now.
That's great. And what about treatment in your studio? What are you using for treatment?
Oh, I've got sound treatment everywhere. You know, I've got a vaulted ceiling and clouds and bass traps and the whole 9 yards. I can sing in there and mix in there, and that's about all I do.
That's fucking awesome.
Record guitar and vocals, bass.
Nice.
Oh God. Dream. You're living the dream, honestly.
Yeah, you know, a bottle of champagne and a bong, and there it is. Why leave?
There you go. Just get those checks in the mailbox.
These days, you don't even have to have people over to your studio. You just send them the mix of the email, and that's it.
That is one thing I loved about the pandemic. No more clients in the studio. And I know that sounds really rude, because a lot of clients like to be in the studio, but it just slows you down so much.
Yeah, never for when you're mixing. Say, if you want to watch somebody mix, go somewhere else, because that don't work.
Absolutely. But now that revisions are done just over the internet, it's just the best. Like, you just like, here you go. You can go have a coffee, do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about it. They'll email you a change list if they want, you know, and then you just go through the list, do it, send it back. That's like, the pressure is gone. It's not like sitting with the clock running and the producer and the client all just hanging over your shoulder, and you're just like, fuck.
Yeah, in the old days, you know, I'd work with a band, and the label would be in Los Angeles or New York or whatever, and I'd have to send cassette tapes of mixes.
Oh my God.
And, you know, no telling what they're playing those cassettes back on. You know, they just sound radically different from system to system. But that's how you sent mixes back and forth, was cassette tape.
Right.
And then later it was CDs, you know, and studios, like the high end studios, would charge you $200 to make a CD of your mix to send to somebody. And
I remember that. I remember the first time as a musician that I said, "Oh, can we get a mix burnt of this?" And they're like, "Yeah, that'll be $25." I was just like, "What?" I was like, "I have CDs." No, you can't use your CDs.
Oh,
yeah,
use our CDs.
Yeah, okay. Very special.
Sure. Yeah, I was like, "Do I have to pay $25 every time we burn a mix?" Yes. Okay. But
anyway,
you know,
a lot of those studios are out of business now.
Well, I ended up working there for 20 years, so it was okay. I got it after that, but beautiful API room.
I love the API. That's what we mixed Sublime on, was API.
Yeah. We had it was kind of like a hybrid. It was like a 3088 kind of, but it was like a 1970 API split. So it was like 32 channels of 550A and the 312C. And then we had a couple 550Bs slotted in there, and then we had the monitor
560s
section. Yeah. And we had the monitor section on the right, which we never used. But it was a cool desk, man. Really cool. And it sounded just like that was another piece of gear you just plug in and you're like, oh, that's the sound I've been looking for my whole life.
It's like the Sublime self-titled album. We recorded the basic tracking on an old Class A Neve console.
Oh, beautiful.
And then overdubbed and mixed on the API, which was, you know, circa 1970 or something like that.
Yeah.
And those boards were both owned by Willie Nelson. And they closed the studio with the Neve board and brought the Neve in and made a hybrid board with the API and the Neve together, you know.
Oh my God.
So that's my idea of the super board.
So did you actually work with Bradley then?
I would.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What was that like?
A couple of years ago, I ran across some letters I was writing to the record label during the recording of that album, and it was mostly like, help. it was a circus. I mean, every day was a circus, and you never knew what was going to happen. It's like they weren't supposed to bring their dogs, and they brought all their dogs, and they chewed up the apartment they were staying in, and they ended up trashing like 4 sets of condos, and they accidentally set the studio on fire and wrecked the studio truck. And wonderful guy, I love him to death, but things get broken when they're around. And they were a lot of fun. I mean, we'd come in at like noon to start working, and at one point they took me aside and said, "Man, we can't start at noon anymore. We're like drunk by noon." It's like, okay, well, let's start early. We'll start at 10, 9, 8, whatever you want. So they settled on 10 o'clock, and they came in at 10 o'clock loaded with margaritas and pitchers. They were already smashed.
Holy shit. Was that something that they were doing before they got the record deal, or was that something that came because they had the money from the record deal?
I didn't know them before the record deal, but I have a feeling they were just continuing their ways.
Yeah. It's so interesting, a record label wouldn't touch a band like that right now, I don't think. Where they were just out of control, wasted all the time.
They've learned some hard lessons. That album almost didn't come out at all. After Bradley died, they were just going to can that record. And then the song got leaked to K-Rock or something and became a hit, and they decided to release it.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a close call.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
A very influential record too for a lot of people. And the bass tones on those records were just unbelievably good.
Yeah, that's Mr. Eric Wilson. He was playing this green bass guitar that some guy made for him. The guy made the bass guitar, and he made Bradley's guitar, and that was also an excellent instrument. I came into the studio with all my guitars and stuff that they could borrow, and none of them stood up to what they had.
Wow.
It's interesting, that bass tone. Like every bass player I've ever met, especially when that record was like really blowing up, they were like, I have to try and get my bass to sound like this. Like it was like something people were striving for at that time,
It's wonderful. We put him through like an SVT with 2 8x10 cabinets, and we mic'd one 8x10 cabinet down the hall, and the other 8x10 cabinet we put next to the drums face down and let Eric sit on it so he could feel the bass.
Oh, wow.
And that really locked him in good.
Wow.
That I would have never. So like you're saying you mic'd the bass from a distance down the hall? You didn't actually.
Well, no, I put the other cabinet down the hall.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
The microphone was probably, 6 feet away from the cabinet still.
Still, I mean, with that much bottom end, that's fine.
Yeah. You kind of need a little distance to get that bottom end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
But yeah, no, sorry, Bruce.
No, that's fine. We've only got like 3 minutes left in the Zoom call. So do we miss anything you want to cover,
And
Paul?
I really...
No. I mean, I
never
wanted to cover anything.
I never wanted to cover anything anyway.
Perfect. So you didn't mind the meandering.
I want my champagne and I want my bong and I want to get back to my studio.
I got some tamales on the stove right now. So when this is over, I got tamales and chili.
Good for you.
Nice. Okay,
Awesome.
well, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And let me know when this is coming out. I'll post it to my socials and all
Absolutely. Be well.
Right on. Good
Take care.
you guys.
Good chat. Thanks.
You too, man. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.
Later on.
Ever wonder what a punch from Elton John feels like?
Or how you'd cope with having turned down the chance to be in Nirvana?
Or what signal Keith Richards gives when he wants you to get the hell out of his hotel room?
Fans of Too Much Effing Perspective don't have to wonder, because they've heard these exact stories and a jillion others on our podcast. I'm Alex Hoffman, former tour manager for Radiohead.
And I'm musician and comedy writer Alan Keller. On the TMEP show, we get guests like Nancy Wilson from Heart, Jeremiah Freites from the Lumineers, and Modern Family's Julie Bowen to tell us things they may have only shared with their therapist, clergy, or a TMZ stringer.
So join us on Too Much Effing Perspective. That's EFFING Perspective. The only podcast you crank up to 11.